to me, the CFO is this investor and allocator of the company's capital and works in partnership with the executive team to allocate that capital towards the highest and best use, right? So when you think about, okay, great, there's accounting, that's extremely important. There's FP&A, that's extremely important. But ultimately what you're trying to do is say, okay, I have this many resources, whether that's dollars, that's salespeople, that's engineers. Those resources need to be working towards something, and we're building towards some larger term goal and longer term goal. That is the job of the CFO, to truly understand and build the direction and conviction of the company to then say, okay, this is how we're going to hit that with the resources that we have.
Welcome, everyone, to Humans of Fintech, the show where we get very real about the people building the future of finance. I'm your host, Nicole Casperson, and today we are live at the Fintech FM Leadership Summit during New York Fintech Week, and I am joined by Erica Dorfman, Chief Financial Officer at Brex. Now, Erica has built her career by doing something I think is really powerful. She's consistently moved closer to the decision. From banking to private equity to operating roles at SoFi and now Brex, she didn't just stay in finance, she embedded herself into the product, capital markets, and the core of how the business actually runs. And that perspective is especially relevant right now because earlier this year, Brex made headlines with its completed acquisition by Capital One, a move that reflects a broader shift in how fintech companies think about growth and scale and long-term strategy. So today we're going to go deeper on that, what it means to lead from the CFO seat in fintech today, and how major decisions like this actually get made, what the future of finance and the future of work looks like from the inside. Erica, welcome to Humans of Fintech.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so you started in banking and private equity. At what point did you realize you wanted to move from allocating capital to actually operating and building inside of a company?
Very early on, like intern level early on, I was in research. And that really spurred my interest in understanding how companies work and really learning about the financial infrastructure of what's going on behind the scenes when you see an earnings report and a company operating. But from there, really, you're giving people advice. And so consistently within my career, I've tried to get closer and closer to what it means to actually move those metrics versus, hey, let me tell you about an investment you can make. And that's incredibly important. But for me, I get really antsy and I just want to be part of changing the company and moving things forward. So I'm, I guess, unable to not be sort of in the weeds of that.
Right, yeah. Well, there's a level of excitement of being in the weeds. Also some, I guess, fun chaos that I think us in the fintech world and the startup world do love and appreciate. Your path to Brex, though, it really has spanned product, capital markets, operations. How has that shaped the way that you show up as a CFO today?
The CFO for us is a really wide-ranging job. So it includes FP&A and corporate finance and procurement, accounting. It also includes data. It also includes business systems. It also includes payment operations. And so that's a pretty wide remit within just the scope of finance. But the finance role actually needs to understand, to do a really good job, needs to understand what the business does and why a development cycle might be one day, half a day, right, for a feature, or might be a project that we need to work on and make investments towards for 2-3 years. And so when I think about the role of the CFO, a successful CFO to me is a really good allocator of capital and investor. Obviously, you need all the processes, like you can't get away from doing some of those things that are a little bit more business as usual, but to be extremely successful as a CFO and as a business, you need to be very good at understanding how to allocate capital and what to guide the business towards and what should the business be doing. So understanding capital markets, but more importantly, understanding the products and the industry and like how we work as a successful organization as Brex, that has been extremely well served by spending time elsewhere within the company.
I mean, we're getting a little bit of a taste of it, but at this point in your career, how would you describe your decision-making style, especially when the stakes are kind of just a little high.
Yeah, they're high. They're always high. Yeah. I try to understand the broader context of the decision, because there's the micro decision of, hey, should we buy this or this? But what you want to ideally look for is, what does this mean 2 or 3 months, years, whatever, down the clock? And honestly, I think making a decision fast is important, because you could sit in analysis paralysis for a very long time in a way that's extremely unproductive for an organization. But you could also, on the flip side, make a decision too fast, where you're not considering what's the ramification of that. So I try to consider, and we as an organization try to consider, is there any sort of two-way door, or is it a one-way door that we really need to evaluate with more rigor, and what's the implication of the decision? Because it's like really small decision, like just go, execute fast.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I've learned in my own entrepreneurial journey, just like the way that the velocity of decision making, of course, though with the precision, right, that is necessary. But to your point, I think, I've learned this from just the incredible women I've interviewed and have mentored me in my life, that the worst thing you can do is freeze. The worst thing you can do is stall. You just have to keep swimming. You have to keep moving. So that is, I think, very important advice.
The only other thing I'll say is, like, give people on your team the ability to make decisions on their own as well, because if you're the bottleneck, or I don't want to be the bottleneck for my team. So I have great people that I've spent time hiring that have worked at Brex for a long time. They are really good at their jobs. I want them to do that.
It's like I hire excellent people for this reason specifically. I agree with that. Let's talk about it's just a small thing, the Capital One acquisition. I think maybe some people have heard of that. Brex had this very clear path toward an IPO. What specifically about this market, this moment, made you guys pause and consider a different path?
We were definitely not thinking about an acquisition when, even towards the end of last year when this all materialized. So it happened very, very quickly. But what ended up happening is, when we started to look at Capital One in particular, because this is the only company that we even considered getting acquired by, we realized that we had so many cultural things in common, right? With Rich Fairbank as a founder CEO, and still the founder CEO of the company, 30 plus years later. Pedro, similarly, they share so many ideologies about how to grow a business and what it means to operate in the fintech space. And then just the way that we could really complement our businesses together, it made so much sense. So it was one of these really unique opportunities that we hadn't planned for. But then when you start to evaluate it, it becomes so obvious that you just can't run towards the opportunity.
What were some of those evaluations? Like, what was the first thing? Because I know it happened fast. It was like
really fast.
This is like a 40-day turnaround.
Less
sorts.
Less than. I think the first thing is culture, right? Where you don't want there to be organ rejection. You want to make sure there's a lot of excitement, because what Capital One wanted out of Brex and what Brex wants out of Capital One ultimately is growth, right? They bought us at a 13 times gross profit multiple. That is way higher than where they trade and where the market is. So they're expecting growth to come from this transaction. And what that means is they need us to continue to execute the way that we're executing. So we need to keep hiring people. We need to keep the people that we have on our team. We need to keep operating the way that we have operated, which means then when you think about, well, what do our team cultures look like? We need to look at the world a very similar way. So that is really, really important, I think, for any acquisition. That probably gets overlooked. And then the flip side of that is, okay, well, how can we actually deliver on that growth together? We have really complementary product sets. We think about data in the same way. We think about underwriting. They think about underwriting, and they're pioneers in that space in the same way. And so when we looked at, okay, well, they have so much customer breadth within their card business today, huge amount of reach, huge brand, huge budget. Brex has software. They don't have that, right? They don't have a lot of the components of our business that we've built that really can be additive to their customers, and they saw that. And they really liked the way that we built our infrastructure, something that is completely unique in this industry, where we actually are doing our own card processing. We've built from the ground up all the infrastructure that underlies our payments operations, our banking operations. So it's really important to sort of have those tenets where you actually understand, okay, do we think about the world in the same way? And is it complementary to deliver on that growth?
Yeah, so well said. And I think, the largest bank fintech acquisition, Brex is an iconic household name in the space. You're really turning over this new wave, right? IPO has always been the default success milestone in our industry. What did you see that made you just question that assumption?
What we saw in partnering with Capital One was a faster path to get to the ultimate goal, which is have Brex in the wallet of every company in the US, but also in the world, right? And that is something that, sure, could we have done that on our own? Yes, but the ability to supercharge that path forward with Capital One made it so obvious to us that this is the way that we can achieve our long-term goal and what we want to produce for our customers in a really, really accelerated time horizon.
And I love that the first piece of it that I do think gets overlooked is this alignment, this value alignment, the alignment of of the founders of both companies. That's something that we just don't typically see, especially so well documented and in the storyline, right? In the narrative. And I think that you and your team and Brex did such an amazing job of just making sure people understood your decision-making around this. We've heard a lot from your CEO, but from your seat as CFO, talk to us a little bit more about how you evaluated the decision. What were some of the other key variables that mattered most, even just outside of the first and foremost most important ones, like you mentioned, like the culture, the alignment, the values?
Really being able to deliver on that growth, because again, what Capital One is able to do and give to Brex's platform is extremely important for us to be able to say, yes, it makes sense. It's going to make sense for Capital One in this time horizon, in the near term, because we're going to be able to grow the companies together. So this deal isn't about synergies, cost synergies. This is really about accelerating growth. And so from a CFO seat, what we needed to do is look and see, well, how does that functionally work, right? What are we thinking about in terms of access to customers? What are we going to give their customers? What do we really like in each other's portfolios? And even when we talk to them about things that are going on in sort of new product lines or how they think about data, how we're thinking about agentic workflows, they're extremely aligned and really excited to invest behind Brex. They view us as a jumping off point to continue to expand what we've built and just, again, supercharge our growth within that space.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a ton of sense to describe this deal as this unlocking of scale while preserving just this ability to build. All right, the acquisition has officially closed, so it is all official and real, so congratulations. What does what does day-to-day look like? Is it super different? What's it like so far?
Day to day, I mean, we're still operating as largely an independent company, so there's still, the same cadence of things that we do internally, projects that we're working on. Right now, we're spending a bit of time on thinking about ways that we can deliver on that growth, frankly. So getting those projects started, I mean, literally day one after the acquisition, starting to work with our teams together.
Right.
So there's a lot of urgency on both of our sides to really deliver on what we are mutually excited about. And I think ultimately, that value is what got delivered to shareholders, and now it's on us to go run with it and show it to the Capital One shareholders.
Yeah, how is we talked about culture too. How is the meshing of culture? I know it's early.
Yeah.
But is that happening? Is it a lot of Zoom calls? Have you
we go out there. I think we are really still an independent company. Yeah. So as much as we're excited to work together, the main objectives we haven't changed, right? So that operating as Brex is still the case. Our roadmap hasn't changed. The only thing that's new is, hey, we've got this extra layer of opportunity really for us to tackle.
Yeah. Hey listeners, I want to take a moment to tell you all about the Academy of Fintech, our private membership community here at Fintech is Femme. Now, I built the Academy for founders, operators, investors, and leaders who don't want to just keep up with fintech, but want to help shape where it's going next. Leaders who want real influence and to build in community as we build our legacies. Now, membership includes a private Slack community, monthly virtual salons and masterclasses, plus exclusive fireside chats with industry leaders. Now, that's over 40 virtual lessons that you can access to build your career and influence. Plus, our members receive early access to in-person events, including the Femi Awards and New York Fintech Week summits, including our crowd favorite, the Fintech FM Leadership Summit, which is also in San Francisco. But the real value is truly the rooms, the relationships, the people. Most of my success has come from building with ecosystem partners and the kind of proximity that turns conversations into real opportunity, real deal flow, real pipeline. And I want to bring that access to you. Now, leaders from Stripe and MasterCard and so many other iconic fintech brands are already inside the Academy. So, if you're looking for a place that's thoughtful, high signal, and built for people actually doing the work, memberships are now open. You can learn more and apply at fintechisfem.co. Just scroll and click on our community tab, and you'll learn all about the Academy of Fintech. All right, let's get back to the show. For some of the founders and operators in the room, and that will listen to the show after, people dream of acquisitions like this, right? They hope to reach this point. What should they understand about how to just evaluate these kind of major strategic decisions like this? Is it ever too early to start thinking about it, right? Like,
I will say one of the smartest things that the team did, and this was even before my time at Brex, but was start to have, from the very beginning, really clean and audited books. Okay. That sounds sort of maybe boring in the context. Yeah, you're talking to CFO, I guess. But that sounds kind of boring in the context of, oh, wow, what about the deal and who could acquire you? But the reason we were able to execute so quickly was because our house was very clean. Right? We had all of the things in order. So when you talk about diligence and in a fast way, it's because all the information was available, the numbers were clean and audited, all of the things were there. Mm-hmm. So I would say from that aspect of getting ready, thinking about that as a founder or CEO, the first thing I would suggest people do is just make sure you're set up for success, because that's going to serve you whether you stay private and you need to do incremental fundraising rounds. Yeah. If you are going to go IPO, you will need to do that. And if you go through an acquisition, you'll need to do that.
Right. I mean, so that makes a ton of sense. And you're right. It does sound so basic, but I mean, there's like so many founders in this room who listen to the show, and we know how chaotic our lives are, but just that actually explains a lot for why it happened as fast as it did, because if everything is clean and good, then it's just like, right? And it's the vibe that it was giving.
Big credit to Eric, Joe, Kevin Moore, all of our accounting and finance folks, and of course our compliance folks, right? Doing things the right way, especially in fintech. You know, there's a lot of names in the dust of folks that maybe have not. And that is really important, especially if you're looking at a bank acquisition. There's not really a lot of leeway to doing things the right way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So start as early as possible. And what I love about our community and our industry is that there are so many partners and people that are down to help with that journey. Some leadership questions for you. What did this process demand from you as a leader that just things you've never had to navigate before?
I have never had to navigate a transaction like this, so a lot of new things.
Like a billions and billions of dollars transaction.
I was trying to reflect on my banking days, but we didn't do anything in fintech. So it did require a ton of just quick learning, which thankfully in the startup world, you do that pretty frequently. I was really grateful to have the team that we had in place, because even though the deal was very fast, it still was time that was being spent executing the transaction, and we tried to keep the deal team pretty small, again, to not distract our business, which I think we did a really good job of. Nice. But from a manager, like leadership perspective, being able to, I would say, navigate so many different threads at the same time.
The many pieces.
Yeah, exactly. And then on that timeline was a new complication, let's say.
What a lovely way to put it.
Yes, yeah.
Oh my gosh. I mean, okay. So then, I mean, how was your sleep schedule?
I did get an 8 sleep on the heels of this deal. No, they're not a sponsor, I don't think, but it's a great product.
All right.
And so it's improving, let's
Improving.
say. Yeah, it's on the trend is positive.
Look, I'm asking myself because I put together, producing New York FinTech Week. We've had a few sleepless nights.
Yes.
So I understand. Not quite in your world, but we'll get there. I mean, we're going to get there. The CFO role has really changed dramatically, and we're going to talk more about this on the next panel. But how do you, Erica, define the modern CFO today?
To me, the CFO is this investor and allocator of the company's capital and works in partnership with the executive team to allocate that capital towards the highest and best use, right? So when you think about, okay, great, there's accounting, that's extremely important. There's FP&A, that's extremely important. But ultimately what you're trying to do is say, okay, I have this many resources, whether that's dollars, that's salespeople, that's engineers, those resources need to be working towards something, and we're building towards some larger term goal and longer term goal. That is the job of the CFO, to truly understand and build the direction and conviction of the company to then say, okay, this is how we're going to hit that with the resources that we have, or that we might need to get new resources. Yeah,
well, I think, we were shouting out the accounting and finance teams because they don't get enough credit. But this context and this orchestration, I mean, AI, how is it being a part of this kind of changing of the inside of a finance organization?
It's a very meta question because we at Brex are building this, right? So we dog food a lot of our products, and our teams are extremely AI forward by design. So our teams are using Brex, beta testing some of Brex's products, working with this agentic workflow on everything that we deliver as a product to our customers and also to ourselves. We've also invested a lot in our internal operations and AI for our operations team, our underwriting team, our customer service team, and then on the finance side, a lot within like how we close the books, how we do budget versus actual, how we record and track how we're performing against our plan. All of that has been really adjusted and modified within the last, call it 4 months, and we're continuing to invest and really iterate on that. So we try to use agentic workflows in everything that we do. I think when you translate that to how does that fit with Brex's strategy, it's effectively the same thing, which is what we want to deliver to our customers is the ability to take away work so they can do net new, more productive, additive, complicated work that isn't able to be outsourced to an agent. And so that's a pretty big difference between ourselves and the rest of the market when we think about what's getting delivered to finance teams and to organizations, to be able to say this is actually removing workflows from humans in a way that is compliant and safe and actually better than what you were doing before. But it doesn't require more people, it doesn't require more agents, it's just a really good agent that does all the work that you otherwise were going to have to hire for. And when we compound that and you look at what that means for the finance team, it doesn't mean you don't have to have people on the finance team. It means you get to audit 100% of transactions instead of some small sample and then miss something as just one small example.
Well, and then the finance team gets to go back to being in that capital allocator mindset, right? Of how are we making more strategic decisions? It's something, one of the founders who will speak later today, her name's Shanti Shanmugam, she said about how, with AI, she's so excited and to see agents like all the automation, what does that mean for like the renaissance of humanity, right? Like, which is, I just love that kind of perspective because, you guys are changing the way that finance teams operate today. It'll look completely different in probably 3 to 5 years. FinTech is moving so fast. You guys are on the manual work problem. I know you are.
Totally.
Because I went to Brex mode.
There you go.
And when Pedro was on stage and was like, we have a manual work problem, I was like, this man understands.
I'll give you two examples here. One is on our audit agent, and I think you saw that if you're at Brex mode. One of the things that a finance team and particularly accounting team might do at the end of the month is reconcile, hey, was this transaction compliant? So they would look and say, hey, does this transaction fit within our policy? If not, why? And go through exceptions. And that's a back and forth with the employee or with the manager to understand, hey, is this okay? And do we have all the backup for this transaction to go through and have a clean audit with our month-end close and then for the year end? So when you think about that workflow, now, Brex, we have agents that can do that back and forth and validation, and then we take out only the most important decisions for the human to make, and that's elevated by the agent to say, okay, hey, you're gonna make a decision here. But all of that back and forth, which takes time and monitoring an inbox and checking, context switching, all that stuff goes away. So now the accounting team can actually focus on, instead of an 8-day close, a 3-day close or a 2-day close.
Please.
Less time spent doing these tasks that are not additive but need to get done. They're very important. They're not, you can't get rid of the outcome, but you can change how you get there.
Right.
The second thing I'll say is, like, on the FP&A side, Megan Force on our team is fantastic, and she's been really driving a lot of what we do around day-to-day expenses and budget management with our team. So one of the things FP&A teams will do is they'll say, hey, I have a budget that I need to manage with my operating partner, let's say on the engineering team. They get a budget that they manage too. Well, now mid-quarter, they're spending against it. They want to know, hey, how is this going, right? How much more do I have to spend? What do I see, right? That's typically a back and forth with a finance partner or with someone else who's managing with them. But it's actually a pretty easy question. It's a binary question. If they had a model, they would just look at it. They don't need babysitting to get there. They just don't have access to the information.
Right.
So if you have an agent, which we do now, to answer questions, then it eliminates that whole back and forth. And then you can ask questions of, like, well, how should I think about this?
Right.
How should I think about this is a really different question than what is the number.
Right. Then and as well as, like, the time it takes for the content switching and all of that. I love that. We're about out of time here, but one of the last questions I want to ask you. What is something, you've been operating at this really high level. We mentioned the high stakes environments. You've spearheaded and one of the largest bank fintech acquisitions. It'll go down in history. What's something that you've had to just learn about yourself as a leader in just these last few months?
The list is very long.
How many reflective walks do you go on a day?
Many, yeah. This was a great forcing mechanism for, I love to delegate, but a great forcing mechanism for delegating things that normally I would have said, hey, I want to do another cycle on this, or I want to review this a little bit more. And then you end up at the same answer a lot of times. So this was a great forcing mechanism to say, okay, great, let's operate even faster than what was already a pretty fast pace.
Look, there's nothing like, just kind of like 3+Xing or whatever your business, to really just like put you in the hot seat. I have experienced that myself in my own way in the last few weeks. So I love it. My last question. What still excites you about building in fintech right now?
There's so much changing. The world is so completely different than it was 12 months ago. So when it comes to agentic workflows, when it comes to stable coins, how money moves, what's happening on the global sphere, the way payments actually happen, right, between counterparties, it is just such a quickly evolving space, and it has been for the last, how many decades, right? It is a really interesting space, and there's so much investment happening now. There was a little bit of a fintech winter a few years ago, but it is really, really exciting to see how much innovation is happening and the sort of modalities that it's happening within that sort of go into different industries, right? When you think about AI, you now are also thinking about fintech in that space. So it's super, super exciting.
I know that there will be more things AI and fintech related that are coming in the pipe across the board. So we will keep reporting and moving on that. Erica, thank you so much. This was such an insightful look into what leadership from your perspective looked like, what the acquisition looked like. I love so much of what you said about outcomes and moving fast, but being thoughtful and intentional around it, and also just pushing yourself forward to make those decisions. I think all of us can relate and understand that. So I think for everyone in this room, it's just been this powerful reminder that the most important decisions aren't the expected ones, and they're really more of the ones that position you to keep building.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Amazing. All right, everyone, Erica Dorfman. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Humans of FinTech. If you loved this and want to hear more from leaders across the fintech industry, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That is FinTech is Femme. And be sure to sign up for the FinTech is Femme newsletter, which you can do at fintechisfemme.co. See you next time.